Miss Kristi here, and I am so excited to be together again cooking in the kitchen. Today we are learning how to make cinnamon and sugar apples. This sweet treat has just 5 ingredients. It cooks in our air fryer, believe it or not, for just 10 minutes, and we end up with the perfect size cozy treat for ourselves. We're gonna have fun making this together today, and I'm so glad you're here.
All is calm and all is bright tonight.
Now, the first step to cooking and working in the kitchen is to wash our hands. While I wash my hands with soap and warm water for at least 20 seconds, let's go over the ingredients and supplies that you'll need to gather to cook along today. The ingredients you need are 1 apple, 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. The supplies you'll need are a cutting board, liquid measuring cup, a small oven-safe bowl, a pastry brush, butter knife, a fork, 1 tablespoon, half a teaspoon, and oven mitts for safety. Okay, great. My hands are clean and your hands are clean. We've gathered our ingredients and supplies, so let's get started making our cinnamon and sugar apples. Now, one thing to note about this snack is we are using our air fryer. So you do need an air fryer if you want to follow along exactly with this snack that we're making today. However, I'll tell you too that you could pop it in the oven. So we'll go over that, but I'm going to use an air fryer today, so I have my air fryer here. But let's go over the very first step, which is going to be taking my apple, and I'm just gonna rinse it, because when we work with apples or fruit or vegetables, you want them to be rinsed and cleaned of any dirt or dust that they might have had when they got shipped from wherever they came from. So I'm gonna rinse my apple real quick before we cut it. All right, so my apple is rinsed and cleaned to the best of my ability. I'm just drying it off. Makes it easier to work with so it's not all slippery and wet. All right, now, the very first thing we want to do for this snack is to cut our apple into slices. So a couple things here. I'm actually just gonna use a butter knife. I can cut an apple with a butter knife. I know if you have a sharper knife, you could use that too. But for me, just safety, it's easier, I can cut it with a butter knife. So I'm gonna grab my butter knife and I will show you how I slice it. However, if you have like an apple slicer like this, where you just push it on the apple and it slices it for you, by all means, use that, it's easier. But either way, we just need to turn our big apple into apple slices. So how I'm gonna do that is, just to make it easy to know where I wanna cut, I usually just make a tiny little indent in a square on the top. So I do like one little side, and then I just put a little slice on the other. I'm kind of making a square around the core, because I wanna cut around the core. If you try to cut this apple right in half, you're gonna end up cutting the core and you'll get seeds. So I just make like a little square on the top, and that's my guide to where I want to slice off the sides. So I'm gonna hold it carefully using a butter knife, especially if you're using a sharp knife, you wanna make sure your fingers are not in the way. So I can kind of take my fingers and I take my nails and hold it steady. This is why we have a cutting board today. So put it on your cutting board, get ready to cut one side off. Okay, there's my first slice. And then I find my little indent around the core, and I slice the second side. Same thing with this side. Again, my fingers on this side are kind of holding it steady, so I don't cut my finger. If you had a sharper knife, it would be easier, but again, I want to use a butter knife. That way it's just a little bit safer for everybody. And the last slice. Okay. So when we make that little square around the top, we kind of cut perfectly around the core, and then you can throw your core away. We're not using that. So now we have a couple big chunks of apples, and for this snack, because we cook it and the apples get a little bit soft, we need smaller pieces or else it wouldn't cook in 10 minutes. So now I'm just gonna take my apple slices here and take my butter knife again, holding it with my hand, and I'm just really gonna make small slices. There's not a perfect amount of how many slices you have to have. Just you know, probably like 10 or 15 slices. Just gonna take, we have 4 big chunks of apple and I'm just turning into about 4 or 5 slices per chunk. So if you're using a sharp knife, be very, very careful, go slow. Make sure you're holding your apple in place so it doesn't slide around. Again, I'm kind of using my fingernails to grab my apple and just making a couple slices. There we go. All right, so this is kind of the thickness that we're looking for. We want it to cook in 10 minutes so they can't be too thick. Some of them are a little bit smaller, so it's not fine. It doesn't have to be perfect, trust me. Got a little piece here, we'll put it to the side. It doesn't have to be perfect. As long as we have a good amount of apple slices from our 1 apple, that's the goal. Grab your oven safe bowl. So it has to be oven safe because I'm putting this directly in my air fryer. If you used your oven, if you didn't have an air fryer, it needs to be able to go in the oven. So oven safe bowl, about this size, so it's not too big. It's gonna fit in my air fryer, that was important. And now I'm just going to put all of my apples into this bowl. This is what it's gonna cook in. And now we can just set this to the side because we need to mix our mixture that we're gonna pour over it and turn into cinnamon and sugar apples. So now that this is cut and ready to go, I'm just going to put that to the side. Next step is to get our butter measured and melt it. We need to have melted butter for this snack. So take your liquid measuring cup. I like to melt butter in a liquid measuring cup just because I know it can go in the microwave. It's just an easy thing to do. So I always melt my butter in a liquid measuring cup. So I'm gonna have that in front of me, and then grab your butter and your 1 tablespoon. Now you have 2 options. If you have a stick of butter and it has a tablespoon line, you could just cut your stick of butter and pop that into your liquid measuring cup to melt. My butter is not pre-measured, so I'm just going to take my 1 tablespoon, it's the biggest one that we're using today, and I'm going to just take my butter knife and get it smushed in here. Because that's just another way you can measure a tablespoon of butter if you don't have a stick. Maybe you're using a tub of butter. You could just try to scoop it out, or again, like I'm doing, grab a butter knife and just get it packed into our 1 tablespoon. So this is how I know I'm using 1 tablespoon of butter. I just really want to smush it in there. If we don't have enough butter, we won't really end up making a sauce for our apples, so that's a lot of where the sauce consistency comes from, is when we have melted butter. So I just really want to make sure I have enough in here. But it doesn't have to be perfect either. As long as we have about a tablespoon of butter. All right, now I'm just gonna take my butter knife, pop it in here. Look at that perfectly half round chunk of butter. I am gonna save this because I'm gonna need this in a second when we measure sugar. So put that to the side. You can put your butter knife down, we're done with that. And now we just need to melt this. So usually a tablespoon of butter, I'm gonna melt it for 30 seconds. We'll talk about what it needs to look like when it's done, but let's put this in the microwave for 30 seconds to get it nice and melted. All right, friends, so this just melted for 30 seconds. You can see I'm holding the handle because the liquid measuring cup is gonna be a little bit warm from being in the microwave. So you grab the handle, and then you can kind of see, or you can see that it's all melted. That's the goal. So if you take it out of the microwave after 30 seconds and it's not completely melted, I would put it back in for maybe 5 or 10 more seconds. But 30 seconds usually does the trick. All right, while this is warm, we want to start adding our ingredients so the butter doesn't get too cold. So put this right in front of you, and now take your sugar and your 1 tablespoon. So I use that for the butter, I have it right next to me. If you did measure the butter in it, you can wipe it off, grab a paper towel. That way your sugar doesn't stick to it if there's still butter in there. But we need the same one, so grab your 1 tablespoon and your sugar. We're just gonna measure a tablespoon of sugar and pour it right into our liquid measuring cup. All right? And now you can put this to the side. We are done with that. You can put your sugar to the side. And the next thing we need to do is measure our cinnamon. So grab your cinnamon and your half a teaspoon. So it's the smaller one today. It says 1/2 TSP, and we need 1/2 teaspoon. And dump that right into our liquid measuring cup with our butter and our sugar. Save this, we're gonna need the half a teaspoon measuring, but you can put your cinnamon aside. And now grab your vanilla extract. So we're gonna use the same one we just used for the cinnamon. We are gonna measure half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now this is a small measure, so you just need to pour slowly. If you're not sure that you can pour it without spilling it, you might wanna do it over your sink and then just carefully dump it in. But I'm just gonna go really slow, and I'm gonna measure half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. If you get a little bit more, not a huge deal. It's just giving it a little bit of a vanilla flavor. And now you can put your half a teaspoon to the side. You are done with that. And you can set your vanilla extract to the side. We are done with that. Take your pastry brush, and this is actually what we're just gonna use to mix this all together. I like using as few dishes as possible, so if I can use this to mix it, why not? And we're gonna end up kind of brushing it onto our apple, so we're using it twice. So just take your pastry brush, give it a good mixture. We wanna mix the butter and the sugar. The butter is still warm, so it should help dissolve the sugar in our mixture here. I like to call it my little applesauce here. All right, now comes the fun part. I think it's the fun part. You are just going to take your apples right in front of you in your bowl that we had measured and put in there before, or cut up and put in there before, and now you're just gonna pour your mixture right over our apple slices. I'm just gonna use my pastry brush to kind of get the bottom here. We want as much of that cinnamon and sugar and butter and vanilla extract into our apples as possible. So just take a second to scrape out as much as you can. You can set this to the side in your sink or wherever. We are done with that. And now I'm just using my pastry brush like a paintbrush, and I am painting my apples with the cinnamon and sugar. We basically want to mix this all around so all of our apples are covered. At the end, you'll see that when we put it into another bowl, we can kind of pour the bottom sauce right on top so we get a little bit extra, but I'm getting ahead of myself, that's in a minute. But right now we're just painting our apples, getting them all mixed up in this mixture before we cook them in the air fryer. All right. So, you'll know it's ready when you see that your sauce mixture is all over your apples, right? So you just wanna make sure they're all covered. And then I'm using my pastry brush to just kind of, the best you can, make sure that they're in as flat of layer as possible. Depending on your bowl size, they might kind of be packed on more. If you have a bigger bowl, they might be spread out. So I'm just making sure they all have a little bit of room to cook. You can put your pastry brush to the side. And now we need to cook them in our air fryer for 10 minutes at 350 degrees. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm going to plug my air fryer in. That's important or it won't work. Okay, I have my 10-minute timer here ready to go, so that's how long it needs to be in there for. We don't have to take it out in between. It's gonna cook for the whole 10 minutes and 350 degrees. So I'm just gonna take my bowl. It's not hot yet. I don't need my oven mitts. I'm just gonna set my bowl inside my air fryer, close the little door. I'm gonna set this to 350 degrees and I'm gonna start my 10-minute timer. And as soon as that goes off, we will talk about getting them out safely and we'll see what they look like. All right, friends, so we just had this cook in our air fryer for 10 minutes. My timer just went off and now we're going to get it out quickly and safely. But if you chose to use your oven because you don't have an air fryer, you would set your oven at 350 degrees once it's preheated and you put your bowl of apples in there, your oven safe bowl. I would cook it for 15 minutes. It's a bigger space, it needs a little bit more time to cook. So if you use your oven, 350 degrees, once it's preheated, cook it for 15 minutes instead of 10. If you're using your air fryer, our 10-minute timer just went off. Now I'm going to put my oven mitts on for safety. I'm actually gonna unplug it first. Whenever you use something like this, like a blender, air fryer, toaster, usually you wanna unplug it before you start taking anything out. So I unplugged my air fryer, and now I'm gonna put my oven mitts on for safety because it's very hot. The bowl that we used and put inside is going to be very hot. So it's important that we use oven mitts to take it out. I'm gonna take this out, set it on a protected surface like an oven mitt or a pot holder, and you're gonna let it cool for 2 minutes. So that's the next step. All right, it's gonna cool for 2 minutes. All right, friends, so I have let this cool for about 2 minutes. The biggest thing is you wanna make sure that the bowl is not hot to touch. That was in an air fryer or an oven, and it got very hot, which is why we used oven mitts to take it out, and now we needed to let it cool so we don't burn ourselves when we touch the bowl. But from here, you can kind of see, this is it. This is our cinnamon and sugar apple snack. Now, we have a fork in our supply list that was just to eat it with. I'm actually gonna pour them into a little bowl because I wanna show you, like if you use this and maybe you decided to put it on ice cream. Last week we made homemade ice cream, so maybe you made that and you wanna top it with some apples and cinnamon. It ends up with a little bit of sauce at the bottom. So I'm just gonna take this bowl and kind of scoop out my apples, but it smells so good. The apples are still a little bit crisp because it only cooked for 10 minutes. So I'm just gonna get them in here. See if my bowl is big enough to hold all our apples. But this is just the perfect size snack too, because really you're only eating 1 apple. So it looks like a lot, but it's 1 apple. Just a little bit of sugar and vanilla and cinnamon. All right, so we've got our apples in my little bowl, and I'm just gonna, like I said, it ends up with a little bit of a sauce. I'm just kind of pouring it over. And if you had it on ice cream or something like that, how good would that be with that little bit of sauce? I spilled some, that's all right. Cooking can be messy. But here we have it, my friends, our cinnamon and sugar apples. That was only 5 ingredients. We cooked for 10 minutes in our air fryer, and now we have this warm and cozy snack that smells like cinnamon and sugar. So I do hope you try it, because it's a bit healthy too. It's just an apple. It's a good treat to try. So I do hope you try and make it, or try and make it again. And when you do, let me know how it goes. As I always say, I love getting to hear from you. So leave me a comment. Let me know if you have any questions. You can even send me a picture of how your cinnamon and sugar apples turned out. I'd love to get to see your creation, and maybe we can share it next week. Now, speaking of next week, on next week's episode, which is episode 37, we are learning how to make air fryer meatballs. These meatballs have just 6 ingredients. They only cook in our air fryer for 12 minutes, and we end up with just a little perfect meal or small snack, and it's super quick and easy. In order to cook along and make these air fryer meatballs, these are the ingredients that you'll need to have in your kitchen for next week. 1/2 pound of ground beef, 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs, 2 tablespoons of milk, 1/2 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Well, friends, our time together today is almost over. I do hope you've enjoyed learning how to make our cinnamon and sugar apples. I know I had fun, and I already can't wait to cook together again next time. But before you say goodbye to this episode, make sure to click subscribe if you haven't already. You just have to click the little picture of me in the corner. That way you don't miss next week's episode. It'll be out on Friday, and I'll see you then. Bye, friends.